Now, the really funny part of that is that nobody noticed that was a phony story. Because at the time, yeah, that sort of seems like a sensible thing to do. Yeah, sure. You know, he's Alan Greenspan after all. In fact, I can't help sharing a couple of quotations I dug up. Here's the New York Times. New York Times, you know, the newspaper of record. We're all supposed to bow down in front of it. The New York Times describes Alan Greenspan, this was a few years ago, as the infallible maestro of the financial system. I mean, isn't that sick and twisted that a free society would look to one individual who has monopoly powers that no individual should have and claim that this is a good, healthy thing, and this guy is the infallible maestro? What is this, the Soviet Union? I mean, what kind of bizarre thing is this? Now, here's my favorite, though, Bob Woodward, the most establishment journalist you can find. Bob Woodward says, "In The Wizard of Oz, when the man behind the curtain emerges, we are let down. With Greenspan, we find comfort." I mean, disgusting, right? So in other words, Greenspan really is a wizard. There is no man behind the curtain. He really is a guy with fire coming up, a big booming voice. And then, of course, you are a little let down when you see him on TV, and he's this dorky guy with the giant glasses. But in any case, there's something odd about this. And so I want to suggest that instead of being the infallible maestro, Alan Greenspan is more responsible than any other human being on Earth for the crisis that we're living through. Now, Greenspan recently jumped on the bandwagon of everybody claiming that the free market has failed. We told you people the free market doesn't work. Alan Greenspan gave a speech in which he said, you know, it turns out there's a flaw in the free market that I never noticed before. Yeah, I'll tell you what that flaw is, Alan. Why don't you look in the mirror? You'll see that flaw staring you right in the face. It's you. It's the very idea that we need to have some kind of Soviet commissar planning money and interest rates. But that's in effect what the Fed chairman does. All right, well, what I want to do is explain to you what the Austrians believe about this. F.A. Hayek won the Nobel Prize for saying central banks, like the Fed, stink. They don't stabilize the economy. They make things much worse. And what Hayek won, and again, you can understand this. If you're thinking, this is a Nobel Prize winning economic theory, there's no way I can get it. Yes, you can, because the Austrians are understandable. A certain 2008 Nobel Prize winner cannot seem to understand this theory, but you guys can. I'm absolutely confident of it. Hayek wanted to answer a nagging question when he started to develop his theory. He wanted to know, why is it that the free market economy seems to move in ups and downs? Like, hey, everybody's doing great, and then everybody's in the toilet. And then everybody's doing great, and then everybody's in the toilet. Like, why does it do that? And the answer that you normally get to that question is totally unsatisfying. The answer you usually get is, well, as Karl Marx would have said, well, that's just the way capitalism is. You know, it just goes up and down. Oh yeah, that's a really satisfying explanation. Thanks for stopping by. So another explanation you get is from Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. Well, you know, investors are subject to crazy psychological swings that he called animal spirits. You know, sometimes they're optimistic, sometimes they're pessimistic for no particular reason, and so we all have this big roller coaster. Now, if that were a satisfying explanation, then the solution to the boom and bust cycle, boom, then bust, then boom, then bust, would be to develop a happy drug for investors, so that they never get pessimistic and we never have a downturn. But maybe the downturns are actually caused by real things, not just by weird psychological swings that have no explanation. So Hayek wants to know, why does this happen? Why does the economy move in cycles? And he particularly wanted to know this because he said, I understand why individual businesses might fail. I mean, we probably all know a business that has had to close its doors. Individual businesses fail because the future is not entirely predictable. You can take a good guess at what the future will hold, but you don't know for sure. So some people start businesses that there's no demand for. They didn't know that. They didn't anticipate the future well enough. If they had, they wouldn't have built that business. So inevitably, some businesses are going to fail, sure. But here's the thing. People who are good at anticipating what consumers are going to want in the future, they make profits. So they get to get more capital to expand their business and do more of what they're good at. People who are terrible at anticipating consumer demand, you know, like whoever, well, I don't want to pick out movies, maybe you like them, but so forget that. But you know, let's just say people who do a rotten job at anticipating what consumers are going to want, they don't make profits, they make losses. And if they're really bad at it, they go completely out of business. And that's not just a sad, terrible thing. That's actually society's way of saying, look, we only have limited resources here, and we can't afford to have you blowing all our limited resources on stupid things nobody wants. So you have to go out of business to free up your resources so that competent people can use them. So in other words, the free market already selects for the best entrepreneurs. People who are good at it prosper and make profits and expand. People who are bad at it go out of business. So at any given time, the market has selected for the best, most talented entrepreneurs. So Hayek's question is, then why do the best, most talented entrepreneurs all at once suddenly seem to make dramatic errors of the same kind in the same direction? Why is that? The very people the market has selected as the best ones, why do they all make these errors at the same time? Why is there this cluster of error? And Hayek explained it's because the central bank misleads them. And here's how he explains this. Now, again, follow me on this. This is not hard. I mean, I can't believe how beautifully elegant it is and how it just opens doors. And this is the only, what I hope will be the only sort of dryish part. And that's just to say one thing about what an interest rate is supposed to do. An interest rate, when you leave it alone, when you don't tinker with it, when you don't act like Alan Greenspan, when you just let interest rates do what they just want to do. Interest rates play a couple of extremely important coordinating roles in our economy. The first thing interest rates do is, remember that businessmen at any time, they've got a million possible projects they could invest in. They could build a new location, they could expand their factory, they could do research into new products, but the limiting factor is where are they going to get the money to fund any of these things? Because to do those things cost money. They're going to have to borrow. If interest rates are 23%, they're not going to want to borrow to do these things. But if interest rates come down to 6 or 5%, maybe they might. So the interest rate plays an essential coordinating role first in that it makes sure that the element of time is coordinated in the economy. And by that I mean, it makes sure that businessmen don't engage in really long-term projects that are going to take 3-4 years before they really start producing profits or turning a profit. They make sure, interest rates make sure businessmen don't start doing long-term, time-consuming things at a time when individuals want to consume right now. Right now, we want stuff right now. So in other words, we don't want businesses doing long-term product development for the future when people want more of existing products right now. There'd be a time mismatch. The interest rate coordinates that. It coordinates the future-orientedness of people. When people decide, individuals like you and me, when we decide, you know, I'm not going to consume that much right now, I'm going to wait. I'm going to save and maybe consume in the future. That's the time when businesses should be engaging in their long-term things. When consumers are going to spend in the future, that's when businesses should be engaged in long-term projects aimed at the future. The interest rate coordinates this time dimension. But more importantly, and this is really two sides of the same coin, the interest rate makes sure that businessmen don't go starting a million new projects before the economy has enough saved physical resources to finish all those projects. That's what the interest rate does. Now, here's what happens normally when there's no Alan Greenspan. We have to live our lives without a Wizard of Oz, okay? This is what normally happens. You and I save more, we put more money in the bank, let's say. When you and I save more, that lowers interest rates. And the reason basically is that now that we put more money in the bank, banks have more money to lend. So the price of lending gets lower because the supply of stuff to lend is higher, so it's cheaper to lend. Okay, so when you and I save more, we bring interest rates down. We, the people, bring interest rates down by saving more. And now we see how that performs these two coordinating functions. Because when you and I save more, what are we actually saying? We're going to consume some of our stuff in the future. That's why we're saving. And so at that time, businessmen see the low interest rates and they say, hey, this would be a good time to invest. Well, good. I'm glad they're doing that. Because this is the very time when consumers have said, you know, we're going to do like 10% of our consumption 2 or 3 years from now. Well, that's when businessmen engage in projects that are going to bear fruit 2 or 3 years. So it preserves this time coordination.